G'day and welcome to the second part of RACQ's three-part panel series on fuel. Well, did you know every time we fill up, we're paying tax? But why? How much? And where is that money being spent? These were some of your questions on fuel tax. And to answer them, here's your experts. Dr. Michael Kane has been working in transport policy and infrastructure for more than 20 years and leads the RACQ public policy team. And Dr. Ian Jeffries is the club's principal economist. Ian brings a wealth of knowledge about the fuel industry and government regulation to the table. Well, thank you both for joining us here today. I might just get you to start, Ian. Can you just explain the current fuel tax system that we have here in Australia?
So currently we're charged two taxes on fuel. There's the fuel excise. Fuel excise in the current regime was introduced in 1997. And then on top of that, we get charged GST. So the GST was introduced in 2001. Up until 2001, excise was indexed. It was increased in line with inflation twice per year. That indexation was paused when the GST was introduced, and excise was set at 38 cents per litre. That pause continued until 2014 when indexation was reintroduced. Since then, every February and August, the excise has been increased in line with inflation. Currently, excise is sitting at about 48 cents per litre, and GST is sitting at about 18 cents per litre.
Yeah, about 48 cents. So Michael, how much of that 48 cents do we see being spent on things like infrastructure or road safety?
So in the present budget, 89% of the fuel excise collected is projected to go into land transport infrastructure. Over the years, that has varied from 85 odd percent to early 90s, with an exception during the COVID years when it went up to 100%. So the RACQ and other motoring clubs around Australia have been calling for 100% of the fuel excise to be dedicated to road and other land transport infrastructure. So that's what we want to see. And if motorists are paying the tax, they should see it, the result of that in their infrastructure.
Yeah, very fair. We also took to the streets to ask Queenslanders if they had any questions for our experts.
My question would be, why are we paying double tax on fuel? We're paying GST and we're paying excise. I mean, why?
Ian, that might be best for you.
Look, this isn't a very satisfying answer, I'm sorry, but excise is excise, and legally it's different to GST, which is a tax. So legally, the federal government can charge that GST on the excise as well as all the rest of the price of petrol. Look, when GST was introduced, it was designed to be a broad-based consumption tax and is charged on most goods and services in Australia. One thing that we should note is, for the first 13 years of GST, the indexation on excise was paused. And had that indexation continued, we'd currently be paying about 70 cents per litre in fuel excise. Okay. However, the combined excise and GST is only about 66 cents per litre.
Okay. We also took some questions through from our social media channels. This one might be best for you, Michael. How does Australia compare to other countries in terms of how much we're paying for excise?
Well, the first thing to think about is that all developed nations, all countries in the OECD, charge a fuel excise, mainly used to go into transport infrastructure. Australia sits at the lower end of that tax. So Europe tends to charge more. So if you think about Germany, for example, petrol there is close to $3 a litre. Countries that pay less than us are basically Canada, the United States and Mexico, and we sit towards the bottom end. Realistically, all countries need to charge an excise, and we're at the bottom end, though we are a large country with a very large road network with not a lot of people.
Well, that's interesting because the previous government here in Australia in 2022 halved fuel excise, which I'm sure many people remember. We are now seeing reasonably high fuel prices again. Should the current government reintroduce that excise cut?
We're not calling for another reduction in excise because we need the income from excise, as Michael said, to fund that critical land transport infrastructure that we need. The situation now in terms of oil prices and in terms of fuel prices isn't as bad as it was back in 2022. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we saw a spike in the oil price, and that was sustained through most of the middle of 2022. At that time, had we not had the excise cuts, prices across the southeast would have peaked at $2.50 per litre. Currently, looking around the large capitals, we are seeing prices peak at $2.20 per litre. Look, we did have a spike of over $2.30 about a month and a half ago. It was a bit of a perfect storm in the Brisbane market when the hike in Brisbane coincided with a spike in the oil prices due to OPEC announcing that they were going to further reduce their oil production. Look, oil prices have fallen since then, wholesale prices have fallen again since then, so we're not going to see those record high prices we saw in 2022.
Okay, and we might take the next question from a member of the public.
With everyone driving EVs, what's going to happen to the fuel excise?
That's a really great question from Shane there. Ian Jeffries.
Look, as we shift towards electric vehicles, look, fuel excise will start to fall. In the most recent budget, look, fuel excise was still expected to increase over the next 4 years. But what it does mean is we do need to look at fuel excise and look at the whole transport tax system and design a better system. Look, fuel excise is inherently regressive. You know, those people in older vehicles, those people who live in the outer suburbs and the regional and remote areas pay more fuel excise than people who live in the inner cities because they have to drive more.
Does RACQ or other clubs have any views on what a new road user charge might look like?
Yeah, so the RACQ has argued for a long time that we need a complete overhaul of the fuel excise, and for that to go, and we'll need to move to a road user charge. What should be in that road user charge? Well, I think one of the key things is that over time, all vehicles should be brought into the road user charge. We need to be thinking about how much money it raises, and it really should be raising no more money than we raise now with fuel excise. So it shouldn't be an additional tax. It needs to be fair and equitable in terms of everyone should be in, and we work out what's the best way of making it fair and equitable. But also we've got to make it sure that the tax is efficient and it's also sustainable. So it's encouraging sustainable transport.
Ian, anything else to add on that one?
Look, I think, what Michael said about encouraging sustainable transport and designing a tax system that promotes sustainable transport is a big benefit of transport tax reform. Look, if it's designed well, it can provide a price signal for avoiding driving in congested traffic, but also encourage modal shift, encourage people to use public transport, to ride and walk more, and also not overly charge those people who have fewer transport options. So the charge would be lower in our regional, remote and our outer suburban areas.
Well, thank you. Thank you both for coming in, and thank you very much to our members for those great questions. Well, that brings our second expert panel in RACQ's Fuel Series to a close. In our third and final panel, electric cars are taking off, but what's next? Have you heard of hydrogen, compressed air or algae-powered vehicles? What will power our cars in decades to come? Stay tuned to our social media channels for our Future Fuels panel.